So we are here today, we are talking about burnout and with any luck, some different tools to help you avoid it. My name is Madison Clark. I use she, her pronouns. We'll go through here in a second a little bit more about what I do, but I was here yesterday with a table. I am the founder of Grief Cards, so I make sympathy cards that don't suck. So when it comes to entrepreneurial things, that's kind of my main focus for the most part. But so let's go ahead and jump in. Like I said, hi, I'm Madison. I am the founder of Grief Cards, and Grief Cards itself is something that was in my head for 16, 15, 17-ish years, from 2008 to 2023. So my brother died when we were in high school. He was a senior and I was a freshman. Car accident on a Tuesday afternoon. He had a full ride to GEWKC at the time. So it was a very sudden incident, and of course, no one in Kansas City knew what to say. What can you say a lot of times in those situations? But what I found was a lot of people who were sending cards had great intentions. They wanted to be supportive, but the cards that they actually had as tools to use were terrible. No sympathy card is going to fix grief, of course, but they certainly can make it worse. So we were getting cards that on the inside had 4 rhyming paragraphs about heaven. On the outside it had watercolor rainbows and rivers and flowers. He was 18, he was 6'5". He thought he was gonna be able to legally gamble when he went to Las Vegas for debate nationals. Like, he was not a rainbow and watercolor river kind of a guy. So for us, it felt like our community couldn't support us. So for years and years, I carried that. I also lost a lot of friends, young and suddenly. Every time I went to find a card and they just sucked. So finally in 2021, 2022, I started putting my company together and then officially launched in August of 2023. So in addition to that, because obviously that's not enough, I'm also the director of college counseling at Cristo Rey, Kansas City High School. So I was in education, I think this is my 9th or 10th year in education, so I'm full-time over there. My kiddos, I'm sure, are wreaking havoc on their sub as we speak. But over there, it's something where I get to work one-on-one with our students to really help them figure out what they want to do after high school. So we are a college prep high school, but with that being said, college is not for everyone. So even though I tell my juniors in particular to operate throughout the year as if 4-year degree is the goal, I tell them it's easier to change from 4-year goal to a 2-year goal or straight to work than it is to go the opposite direction. So a lot of those intimate conversations, learning a lot about their lives, and of course that then weighs on me because I go home after school and I have my 75 juniors with their stories on my heart at the same time as I have all of our seniors who 2 were crying from joy because they got accepted to KU and 2 were crying upset because they did not get accepted to KU in the same afternoon. So of course I'm taking all of that home with me as well. Again, as if that's not enough, I am also a full-time executive MBA student at GEWKC. I am doing that specifically for the sake of Grief Cards. So I have an undergrad degree in creative writing, another undergrad degree in religious studies for fun. I also hold a master's in conflict transformation and social justice. So I have no formal business training, not even a little bit. So I'm in my first semester over at GEWKC, so I'm starting to kind of learn. Took that first year with Grief Cards to figure out maybe what I don't know yet. And now that I sort of am aware of what I don't know, I'm working on building that skill set. So I'm also currently working with our group within our cohorts. We have tons of projects, of course, due between now and our last class this semester on December 14th. So holding all of that, at the same time, I'm a former, I promise I'm not doing it right now, former freelance writer. I was part-time for 7, 8, 9 years on the side of education, and then I changed to full-time for about 3 years as a writer. And then at the end of that, the reason I ended that career was because I wanted to focus more on Grief Cards, and having that comfortable day job kind of structure was more helpful for me to have leftover energy for the sake of Grief Cards purposes. So just to give you that background there, because obviously when you're talking about burnout, my first question at least is always, does this person get it? I promise. I very much have been there, and I would say have been tiptoeing on the line as well over this last kind of year, my first year with Grief Cards. So as we jump into things, I wanted to share with you guys, I'm not someone who loves to be perceived very clearly by other people, but we did this Hogan 360 as a part of the EMBA, and I wanted to share some of the feedback with you guys so you can see how abundantly clear it is to everyone around me that I'm doing a lot of things, and oftentimes they are concerned that I'm on the edge of burnout, I'm maybe already in that area, and they're worried about my well-being. So just a couple pieces of feedback I got. For myself, I said I often bite off more than I can proverbially chew and end up having to sacrifice my own well-being to follow through on commitments. I'm self-aware, I promise. But then also we had one of my managers who said that my dedication and drive are admirable, but an area for improvement lies in her tendency to take on too much at once. Again, consistency, we love it. Again, my peer said she will do anything to get the job done. I wanted to make this a little less obnoxious for the slideshow. She put an anything in all caps with multiple asterisks on each side on the actual 360 feedback form. We have another manager who said that I am a doer. I work hard to commit to organizations and tasks that are meaningful to her. True, maybe too many at once, occasionally. And then lastly, another peer said that my biggest area for growth is managing the tendency to take on too many tasks, although she does thrive in a busy environment. So I have always been like this, even going all the way back to elementary school. I was playing competitive sports year-round. I had to take piano lessons at 6 a.m. on Monday mornings before school because I refused to stop doing competitive piano, and the only time in the week that I could make it fit was Monday mornings before school. So I've always been like this, so having a lot of things, multi-passionate things that I'm pursuing simultaneously is really how I operate best. But one thing I have found is that does not mean I'm immune to burnout. I think for a while I was hopeful that was the case, but it definitely was not. So, as we're going through this, I think steering clear of burnout really boils down to one simple equation. Steering clear of burnout is synonymous with steering clear of isolation. So if you are starting to feel isolated in your work, whether you're working for yourself, working for a company, both at the same time, also studying of some sort, I do not have children of my own. I know that is a whole other layer of extra work that y'all can have. So all of those things together, if you start to feel isolated in any of those categories, it's going to push you closer to burnout more quickly. So with that in mind, something that I've learned from someone who I really admire, a full-time entrepreneur, Nicole Antoinette, always says that journaling is a generative work practice. That was a concept I had never thought of. I thought of journaling as something I had to do for creative writing classes in college, something I've had therapists ask me to do. I never followed through on that as homework, but something that's more of a personal task as opposed to something that can be done for the purpose of work specifically. So the way I chose to structure this is we're going to go through a couple of different prompts. I will share a little bit about my experience with it, my decisions around that prompt, and then I will give you guys 5-6 minutes to sit and write and think. If you're typing in your phone, great. If you're writing on paper, great. Typing on your computer, great. But actually use the time to sit and at least write future use and bullet points, because the things that come up first to mind will most likely be the things that you either realize are serving you well right now, or you immediately realize are not doing so much to serve you at all. Okay? So as we go through, like I said, I'll pose the question first, and then I'll give my version of it. Feel free to start writing at any time. If you see the question and you know immediately how you want to respond, jump in. I'll still share my part for the people who maybe need a little bit of inspiration or a few ideas, how it shows up and operates for me. And then I'll just keep an eye on the clock, so don't worry about the time. I'll give you 5 or 6 minutes for each one. All right? So going into the first one, what do you do outside of work? Things you do not get paid for, things no one asks you to do, things that you genuinely enjoy to whatever degree. A couple of things for me. I just had the first of hopefully many gender-affirming closet events, so created by the queer community for the queer community. So it was a completely free closet event, fully donated clothes from all over the city. We ended up with over 3,000 donated items. We hosted it at Big Rip Brewing Co. up in North KC, and we ended up only having 800 items left at the end of the day. Totally free to come shop, walk out with 5 trash bags full of things that you want for yourself, for Christmas gifts, whatever. Perfect, beautiful. So that came to be while drinking and throwing darts at Shay Charlie. And then it turned into this real life thing that now we're wanting to do more moving on. On top of that, I do still play piano. I carry my piano music in my car. I usually just hijack pianos wherever I go. I do sometimes the Guitar Center near my house has given me full reign before 5 p.m. to use the practice rooms whenever I want. So I just kind of pop around. It's something that for me just feels really good to sit down, mainly the same like 6 popular songs, 2 of which are from Linkin Park, that I just sit down, play my way through, and then head out. Just helps calm me down at any point in the day. I am also incredibly active with Stonewall Sports. So it's a queer sports league that's all over the country, but there is a chapter here in Kansas City. So I'm the captain of my kickball team, Babe Ruthless. I am also on, there's too many other teams to even talk about, but something that's come from that then is also traveling to play competitive queer kickball around the country. I played competitive softball my whole life, all through college, so having competitive sports back in my life without the pressure of 6 a.m.s and afternoon lifts and directions from nutritionists every 2 seconds, avoiding all of that, but still getting the enjoyment of being outside, being with friends, getting some of that competition has been very helpful. And then lastly, starting to become a part of the GEWKC community has been really enjoyable. Obviously, my EMBA itself is a lot of work, but outside of that, starting to explore, hey, what groups are on offer for grad students that are actually interesting and supportive and just nice to be around. So those are some of the things that I like to do outside of work. So I will give you guys 5 minutes here. Jot through the things that you currently do outside of work, and go ahead and start thinking of things that you've previously done that you enjoyed, that you'd like to bring back in, or things you haven't done before, but you're like, oh, it would be really nice if I also had this aspect added into my out-of-work life. All right? One more minute, y'all. One more minute. That's what I get for turning the mic off in between. All right, one thing that did come up in conversation that I do want to note as we're going through the rest for sure is if you are an entrepreneur, obviously there are things that go on both sides, right? There are things for work, like we're both in the grief space, and so we're kind of talking about, hey, if I'm reading something, I love reading griefy memoirs, love. But also as I'm going through and reading those, all I'm thinking about is, oh, here's my response to that. Here's what I'm learning from that. Here's what people who utilize my company can learn from that. So it's all so interrelated. I will say that everything I have listed up here is 0% related to my company. I've made a point to make sure that that's not related to my work at all. And then on top of those, I read a lot, but I make a point to read at least 2 or 3 books of poetry per month that have nothing to do with grief, because I need to just not be in that at all times. A friend also recently made me read a couple of romance books. Now I can't stop because they're so bad, but they're just so easy to read. They don't require additional thought. They don't require anything else to come up. Trust me, I didn't know I'd be that way either. Here we are. So our next question is, what are the seasons of your work? This is something I think often we don't necessarily consider with our work, especially as entrepreneurs, because it's kind of just go, go, go. So I wanted to use my college counseling specifically to give you an idea of what seasons look like for that as more of a traditional kind of 9-to-5 type setup. And then let you guys have a little time to think through, okay, what seasonality do I see in my work now, in my company now, and how do I maybe want to shift that in the future? So for college counseling, you have May through August, which is thankfully the calmest time of the year. Our seniors have graduated. I'm off on summer break, doing grief cards things. But as far as taking care of my kids goes, I have very little responsibility the second the graduation finishes. Then, of course, we get to September and October. After that school year starts, it takes about 2 weeks before our seniors realize, wow, this is real life. Ms. Clark didn't lie to us all of our junior year. We do have to actually start applications and get deep into this whole college process pretty darn quick. So those 2 months are absolutely wild. We just finished those, thankfully, and now that November to February period begins. So we have a little bit of respite in there because we have our holiday breaks that pop up. But for the most part, kids are applying for scholarships and kind of just waiting around for decisions. Most of our students complete their applications before that first week or 2 of November. So then after that point, there's very little applying left to do. It's a lot of sit and wait and try to put your name out for more money options. But in that period, it is a lot of waiting, but it's kind of waiting with bated breath. So we're figuring out how can we navigate that and support students through that in particular. And then you get to that March and April period where so much decision making happens so quickly. They've been getting their decisions slowly, they finally start to get their financial aid paperwork, and then all of a sudden they're told, hey, by May 1st, you have to 100% decide what you're doing with your life. No pressure or anything. So it's almost like we have all those months of waiting that then all of a sudden the action required in a short time period just comes like that. So that's the seasonality for my job at work. Part of the reason I did not use grief cards for seasonality here is because I haven't figured out my seasonality for grief cards quite yet. I'm still only a year and 3 or 4 months old in terms of having the company open. I have definitely realized that summer outdoor events with stationery, not the best combination. So in terms of in-person events over the summer months, I think that will be a slowdown. But then that is going to be a perfect time for me to actually dive deep into new marketing strategy going into the fall. New efforts for prepping content ahead of time over those summer months when the weather's nice, so that when the weather's terrible, I don't have to go take pictures and do things. I can just pull from them while it's snowing outside. So I'm slowly putting together the seasonality of my company, but for the sake of school, just the way that things are set up there as a part of a larger system, that's how our seasonality works. So I want you to think for your company, for your work, how do these things kind of break down over the months? Is it something where every year is different? Truly, there's no overlap from year to year. That might be the case. Most of the time though, if you dig a little deeper, you'll at least see trends in terms of this time of year, people are asking for this thing from me. This other time of year, people are mainly asking for this of me. And then kind of trying to piece together those months in between. If you don't get through all 12 months, that is fine. It is only 5 minutes. But at least to sit down and kind of start making a list of, okay, this month, generally I'm responsible for these things. And at least start with that, okay? I'll give you those 5 minutes again. Let's do 1 more minute on this one. 1 more minute on this one. All right, for this one, I do want to give you a couple of minutes with your table to share anything that you sort of realized. I feel like when you have more of a classic 9 to 5, you're kind of just told what the seasons of your business are. Whereas when you have your own company or your own work at all, you're the one who has to figure it out. I just learned terminology like this maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and before that hadn't ever considered, do I even have seasons of my work? I couldn't even tell you. So let's do 2 minutes here, just sharing with your group if there's anything in particular that you would like to note. No pressure to share, and if you are by yourself at your table but you would like to share, please just pop on over to one of your neighbors. All right, we'll do 2 minutes.
Full-time student going to college, and I'm working as a student worker at a cybersecurity company called Top Technologies. I'm also playing baseball as well. So for me right now, like season-wise, like in the summer, just being not a student for a couple months, that's more the 9 to 5 framework as far as time goes.
So are you starting your own business?
I plan to start my own business. I want to get more into the sports management scene, which is kind of my goal. But right now I'm just kind of doing this, especially because it's a startup that just started back in February. It's kind of like a good way for me to see from like a business perspective without any sort of how to build a business up.
Yeah.
So yeah, in the summer obviously most of my work is freelance. Once I get to the school year, especially when I get to end season, timelines and deadlines and things kind of change for me.
I am just starting my own website. And but not nearly as extremely as my former job. My former job was extremely seasonal. Well, I had waves, it was year round. And so I had to.
I did send you an email, but I was very
and
you did.
So I think that part of it for me, probably as far as this process is that I'm now finding new rhythms to. It's going to be more
Consistency.
and
Yeah, that is.
well, this is one of the things why I wrote about so
1 more minute. 1 more minute.
I'm actually excited to have that. So you can find me
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I do I guess I'm very extreme.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I'm looking forward to. It's probably like people who work for Hallmark and they're like, oh my goodness, they're done with Christmas because they've been, creating Christmas cards over the spring and summer, and then they get to Christmas like
Burnt out.
I'm tired of it. So your seasonality plans more to do with your school and job.
Yeah, I have.
Well, if you do sports,
Yes. I mean, it's a year-round commitment, but there's times where, like in the spring, it's like physically loaded, even in Missouri, as much as I like to be because of travel.
So what sports is any specific sport?
I play baseball.
So you'll go with your sports businesses to perform.
I wanna help them out with travel baseball facility, kind of do operate kids like affordable option to showcase their talents and to help pay for college. But that's kind of my perspective.
So, like, what would the facility would they kind of play in?
There would be a travel team where we train work at, and then teams would have teams that disperse out to their across the country to showcase those coaches. But it's just a really experience. Trying to find a program that can be on the same circuit to those coaches without having such a financial burden specifically towards the families. I mean, there's a ton of travel facilities, but the ones that are kind of on that circuit, they're all kind of print and copy of one another. If that kind of makes sense. It's just different names. I think that's mainly because it's just kind of the way the framework of their business works. They have a lot of teams in each age group to kind of feed money into just 15 kids instead of 60. Which I understand why they do that in a sense, just to afford it, but I haven't figured out how to do it.
So, is it your hope to be a professional player?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to still go down that route because I think there is a little in that sense of the business. So that's the
Alrighty, y'all. Moving on to our next question. I get the feeling we can chat about this for days because obviously it's a topic that affects a lot of people. So our next question here is thinking about who you work with. So me, myself, and I own my company. I'm incredibly supportive by my parents' free labor, and also their third bedroom being the storage for most of all my inventory. So thinking about that then, when you're thinking who do you actually work with? Who are you sitting down with? Whether you're telling them what you're working on, whether they're working on the same things, who are people that you feel like in one way or another are in this work with you, or at least alongside you? So a couple examples for me. I love co-working. With my change to a school schedule, it's not as abundantly easy as it was before to meet for a 12 o'clock coffee and stay there till 3, just on our separate laptops working. But there are so many virtual co-working options that I have found are very supportive as well. One of those is the Get Shit Done Club. Big fan. It is during the day for the most part, but it's 2 days a week, and it's people showing up from small businesses all over the country. Basically saying, hey, I need an hour with someone else keeping track of time, someone else telling us when to start, when to stop, and I get to just sit down and do the things that I need to work on. Additionally, I have my coworkers at school, of course, but then I feel like in the grief space in particular, you have coworkers of people who are also in the grief work. Because when you're sitting down together, you're like, oh, you get how ridiculously hard it is to just share your story 99 times a day and try not to cry every single time, and also try to like portray that yes, it's changed your life irreparably, and also then have a nice business sales conversation afterwards. So being able to feel like I have coworkers in that grief space has been transformative. So finding people in your workspace, whatever that might be, who genuinely are kind of in the trenches with you, even though their trench might be like next door to yours, or like branching off separately from yours. They're in similar work and they really understand where you're coming from. And then lastly, I had to put them on here. I feel like I work with so many bartenders because I shamelessly show up at bars with my laptop, sit at a table, and work until my laptop dies on a regular basis. I highly recommend Harry's Country Club in the River Market. Chez Charlie is great near Broadway and Linwood. I can list out many others if people need suggestions. But there's just something about sitting in an environment that is meant for enjoyment. To be able to just sit, if you drink, grab a drink. Honestly, half the time I just get orange juice because it sounds good. And I'm just sitting there sipping, working. Once my laptop dies, that's my boundary to go home. So I do that on a regular basis when I leave school. I'll just go sit down at a bar somewhere. I'll usually tell friends, hey, I'm heading this way. Sometimes my friends respond with, ooh, we're already at this coffee shop, come join us. Great, see you in 10 minutes. So there's kind of just something about finding a culture where you're able to get out of the house You're able to get out of a normal workspace and be able to sit and actually do work, but still have a boundary, not my forte, but some sort of a boundary around when you're going to get up and leave. Okay, so for me, that's kind of my strongest list of who I work with. So I want you to think through, of course, first the obvious ones. Who's literally sitting next to you doing the same stuff every day? Who do you reach out to on a regular basis for help with tasks? But then thinking a little bit more expansively. Who are other people that you feel like are in it with you, even if their to-do list looks different from yours? Who do you feel like is kind of sitting nearby witnessing you doing your work, even if they're not actively involved with it? Do I talk to bartenders about grief all the time? Yes. But that's something that then they just kind of are aware of what you're sitting there and doing. So I feel like there's still a bit of a coworker in that way. I'll give you guys a little shorter time for this one because it's a little bit more of a list, but I will give time after for your table sharing again, okay? One more minute before we start sharing on this one. All right, let's go ahead and open up sharing. In this instance, it is totally okay to steal ideas from other people. If they mention someone and you're like, oh, dang, I didn't think about them, but they're really important for me, add them to your list. I was hoping for either side
I would say with the work that I'm currently doing, so at my cybersecurity company, I'm a student worker that's also in the sales operations that are going on there. So like, I'm kind of in my own level in that sense, but although I kind of saw it more, how should I phrase it, in the sense of like, there's other student workers that are working on their individual tasks, but at the same time, there's like still some sort of like integration and kind of the end goals that we're trying to accomplish. And then I also throw in like my teammates, for example. I kind of see them as my coworkers. Obviously, there's a lot of like individual things that we're working on, but there's a lot of relatability in that natural team environment. So.
My wife works in the library system, so like I definitely go to the library system in order. And part of my burnout was being in marketing when I worked for 6 years. First, I was a student to as an agency for the 4 years, and I think it just slowly took away from me. I didn't get out. So I got tired.
calendars because I'm like, that's probably like me in libraries or America.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's weird how there are times that getting out of your usual mindset when you're at a library.
One more minute sharing here. One more minute.
I pulled up her website.
My father-in-law is also a partner, so it's us three doing it. I got social marketing, she's got financial, and my father-in-law's been retired for 50 years of retail and big box. So the three of us will be this kind of a pretty good three-leg.
All right, it pains me to cut off good conversation. It truly pains me. I tell my kids on a regular basis, I love the energy, but sometimes we have to direct it in a new direction. So our next question here is thinking about who fully understands the work that you do. Who gets it on a base level of like your to-do list, but who is also sitting there hearing you rant about what thing is driving you nuts right now. Who is also getting the 2 a.m. text celebrating something. Who is also sitting there next to you while you are literally just crying and sending emails. Never been there, don't know what example that could be referencing. Before I show you my list here, I started writing and I was like, this is getting really obnoxious really fast. So I didn't put all my people. But I will say there was a time in my life, we were talking about it earlier, where my thought was I can carry all of this just fine. I've gotten through how many terrible things, like I can carry work's not that big a deal. And then I realized how much easier everything gets when you at least tell other people what's happening. When other people understand, oh, I'm stressed about the paper coming in for the letterpress this week because we need to get to press because this new order came in. We need to get to press, we need to get them printed, I need to get them home so that my parents and their cats can sit at the dining room table, go through and fold every single card, pair it with an envelope, put it inside its sleeve, then group those sleeves in groups of 10, and then everything that comes after that. So when I'm able to sit down with friends and say, hey, oh my gosh, this thing is driving me insane, again, often at Shea Charlie while throwing darts, that has been truly transformational for my work, especially working for myself. So there are people in here who are named on my fancy little list on the screen here in a second. There's also people who would be on the second line, but I felt it'd be really obnoxious to go on like 3 or 4 lines of names. So first, definitely my mom and dad. I am their only living child. It was just me and my brother. So that was something where, for us, they've been incredibly involved in my life ever since. Very open with them about a lot of things. They are invited to every friend activity, it seems like, that happens. We had a queer kickball end-of-season bonfire at their house the other day. I don't think my father has ever been around so many queer people at once, but he had a wonderful time and stayed up late at the bonfire with 2 people who came late. So they have been just incredible for me. There's also kind of a core group of friends listed here, one of whom, Gabs, shout out, is in the room here. But let's see, the first, so Gabs, Charlie, Shannon, Cox, and Arden, and Audria are local. They're all in the Kansas City area. Lauren is someone I met while living in Jakarta, Indonesia. She's South African originally. She now lives in Thailand with her partner. But we WhatsApp at least once a week. We send each other little podcasts about everything happening in our lives. My friend Lexi is someone I also met in Indonesia while I was there. She is American, but she works for the government and is currently stationed in New Zealand. So her little kiddos are attending school in Auckland. And then my friend Malco, we met originally in Belfast, Northern Ireland, when we both studied abroad. Stayed up late till, well, closed down some bars. There's a theme here, in case we haven't noticed. Closed down some bars and then stayed up until sunrise just talking about what we were passionate about. And we've stayed very, very close friends ever since. I'm actually going to get to see her for the first time in about a year over Thanksgiving because she's coming to town. So those were some of the people that truly, if I sat down and asked them how does my supply chain work, I don't think they could tell you. But when it comes to the emotional labor that goes into my job, when it comes into like everything I'm doing for my kids, everything I'm worried about for my kids, what I'm doing for class, if I need them to sit and wait for me to finishing an accounting quiz before we can go get dinner, they are intimately aware of all of those things. So I want you to think about, even if your first thought was nobody fully understands, I want you to think about at least one person who you feel like fully understands the work you do. If it's not the to-do list, that's fine. If it's more of the emotional work required, the emotional labor, the keeping track of things, the endless to-do list tracking, if it's more of that stuff that they get, because they hear from you, perfect. If you go through all the people in your life and you think at the end, I actually don't have anybody right now who fully understands, that's fine. Come up with 2 or 3 people who might be those people for you. Who you're like, hey, where our relationship stands right now, I could see that transitioning into something where they can be that person for me. Okay? I'll give you 3 or 4 minutes here, and then yes, we will share again after this one. As your table finishes, go ahead and start sharing. I'm not surprised that this is one that people immediately want to talk about. So as your table is done writing, go ahead and begin to share.
I put down my mom for this strength, I think, kind of now that I'm starting to grow up, I'm starting to realize that like our college experiences are extremely similar in the sense of that she was also having to work full time in order to pay for her college. And kind of she has that right now, trying to put as much on her plate as possible in order to not only like fulfill her needs, but fulfill other people's needs. And then I just kind of made it a priority, especially now that I've started to actually work for myself. I just talk to my mom at least every other day, and it kind of serves as a check-in for each of us, and I think she understands kind of the amount of work I'm doing, and it's also naturally but everything she's doing.
One more minute for this one. One more minute.
She's like, I can help you with that. If you think this is the show, definitely willing to come over. So those are kind of who. And we, the outside of that, we have a Jeep. So they don't sort of give you do what they give you. They actually saw where I was just done with it. We were out in Colorado.
All right, everybody.
So it's just me.
We've got, I believe, 2 more questions left here. 2 more questions. I'm hoping to leave a couple of minutes at the end if people have questions to follow up, but if not, I'll just hang out outside if anybody wants to chat. Next question will be, what care practices have you been putting off? Ooh, heard that. So if we're thinking about burnout, yes, we can take these efforts to kind of prevent work from feeling so overwhelming all the time, from wearing on you so quickly, but we also need to think about how you are genuinely caring for yourself. So hopefully, some of these are separate from work, but things that right this moment you've been putting off. Yes, I created a list. I could have gone on for much longer, so before I share it, when I give you time to write these, you are not beating yourself up for this. You are noticing. You're examining and saying, ooh, yeah, I have been meaning to do that, but I just haven't made it happen yet, okay? You are not listing in order to then look at it and be like, oh, I'm taking terrible care of myself. You're fine, you're doing fine. We're just thinking about how it can be a little bit better. So for me, since changing to school full-time, my current gym at my apartment does not open till 7. On a slow day, I leave home at 6. So there is no gym time. I'm moving in December, thankfully, and that has a 24-hour gym, which I'm very excited about. So I'm hoping that that will help me be able to have a more consistent gym and school schedule. Like I said, competitive athlete my whole life. I feel so much better when I'm lifting heavy things and putting them down on a regular basis. Also, my AM and PM routines. I love a good routine. My morning routine right this moment is snooze alarm a couple times, give the cat her snack because she's literally screaming at me, throw on some makeup, throw on some clothes, leave home. Truly, in about 15 minutes, I go from horizontal to on my way to take care of my high schoolers. Not ideal, not my favorite thing, but lately I have not had that routine back in the way I would like it to be. Same thing at night. I get home, especially now with it being dark, before I even leave school, I get home and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I just need to be horizontal. That's the end of it. So I grab a snack, I lay in bed, again, cat helps, and then I go to bed. That's pretty much it. So I'm wanting those routines. I know I feel so much better when I have them, but I have been putting off reinstating those. And then lastly, cooking at home. I've developed a deep passion for cooking all the places I've lived and moved, but lately it has been, not gonna lie to you, Chipotle on repeat on a regular basis with like a little interruption of Taco Bell, okay? I have cereal for breakfast and then I have groceries going bad in my fridge. So that's another thing that I know for myself I really need to get back on top of. So thinking for yourself, we're not going to share these because I don't want it to turn into like a, oh, me too. We are just noticing. So let's do 2 minutes, not too much time to beat yourself up. 2 minutes to list out some care practices that you personally have been putting off lately. One more minute here. I am cutting it short on this one, like I said. Okay. Before we go into our last question, I do have one thing I want to note before we actually have our last question pop up. So, relentlessly realistic. I want those to be, if there's 2 words you take away from today at all, if there's anything you remember other than how funny I am and how cool my company is, I want you to remember relentlessly realistic. Okay? Your capacity changes on a day-to-day basis. Your capacity changes on an hour-to-hour basis. One of my cards says, it's so common for people in grief to say 1 day at a time, take things 1 day at a time. And it's a card that literally crosses out 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time, and then it says 1 breath at a time, because there's some days you are literally functioning breath by breath. All right, so relentlessly realistic, beating yourself up for failing to achieve unattainable goals is pointless. That is not going to help you, that is not going to help your work, that is not going to help your community, anyone you are trying to lift along with you, that is not going to help at all. So if it is a day where your capacity is literally 2%, and you're able to give that 2% that day, amazing, you killed it. All right, so if there's anything you take away here, I want it to be that. And I felt that was important to share first before we go into our last question, because our last question is, what can you do today to feel 1% better? All right, my 2 here, I need to do at least 1 load of laundry. Goodness gracious, the load in my washer has been there an embarrassing amount of time. I need to do a load of laundry when I get home tonight. I also really need to schedule a haircut. The amount of time I'm having to spend getting my pixie cut to look functional right now is solely because I've been putting off scheduling a haircut. I will feel 20% better once I have my haircut done, but right this moment we're just thinking 1% today. I will hop on the website and I will make an appointment to see Liv in the next couple weeks. Okay? So just 2, maybe 3 things for yourself. Things that you can do today in order to feel 1% better. Work, personal, community, does not matter. You are a person that contains all of those things. So just 2 or 3 things that could make you feel that 1% better today. Once you finish, go ahead and start sharing with your table.
Plan out something we need to do this week and just completely disconnected from my responsibilities, just given the time of year in the semester.
So, truth be told, so I did mine while we were sitting here. I promised my daughters we were going to go see a movie tomorrow, and I got the tickets purchased. Because I've been working a lot of hours, I was like, well, I need to do this, and all day today, almost all day yesterday. I was thinking that, and then so yeah, and yeah, let your weekends be weekend. I'm really bad at I'm thinking of getting ready for the weekend.
Yeah, I'm bad at
Yeah.
myself.
So in fact, it's so funny because it's literally what I'm coming here thinking.
It came through when I was in a session, they call it a sign. So there's my wife has a sign like that. You know, so it's getting these things organized on.
All right, y'all, let's go ahead and start wrapping up here. We've only got 2 more minutes left.
She's very organized. She waits 10 seconds, I can't. You know,
So with our last couple of minutes here, I want to say one thing and then I want to ask one thing of you. Number 1, thank you all so much for coming. I think so often burnout is something that's not talked about in depth. It's sort of talked about as something like, oh, I'm feeling burnt out, and then no one continues that conversation, which is not beneficial to anybody. That's only keeping people in a not so great spot. So I really appreciate y'all not just coming, but I was hearing so many great conversations at tables as I walked around, and getting to see you guys bonding with people that maybe you already knew, maybe they're complete strangers. Absolute gift for me, so thank you for that. But then I also want to say, if you haven't already changed contact information with your group, there's my name up there. If you want to find me anywhere, it's usually Madison T. Clark. If you want to find somebody at your table, take a minute, find their Instagram, LinkedIn, email, phone number, whatever. If you're looking for a new coworker to go sit in bars and work next to you, get that information from them. And then my one final thing that I'll leave you with is you guys have all these notes, you have all these things you wrote for your future self. This week you have so many things that you're going to hear that you want to implement. Those ideas are not going anywhere. You do not have to do all of those things the moment the conference is finished. Hear me out? It won't happen, even if you try. So make sure you kind of measure things out for yourself. Think of the seasonality. Where are you at in work right now? Are you in a spot to truly implement things you learned this week? Or is it better to put those on the back burner and come back to them later? All right? Thank you guys so much for coming. I'll hang out just outside. Have a wonderful day.